Isn't it cute? Anyways, it's Tipsy Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about HDR. What does it mean? How do you do it? Why do you do it? So first, what does it mean? HDR stands for high dynamic range, and an image that has a lot of dynamic range means that there's a lot of details in the highlights and a lot of details in the shadows, whereas normally with no HDR or anything like that, you have to compromise somewhere. So you'd have a picture maybe where all of the highlights, you have a lot of detail, but all of the shadows are completely dark. You can't see a dang thing. Or the reverse, you could see everything that's in the shadows, but the highlights have gone and you've got a sky that's pure white. HDR is the method in which you can get those details in the shadows and the details in the highlights and maintain the ones in the midtones too while you're at it. So how do you do it? A lot of cameras these days have an HDR mode, which means that it's going to take 3 pictures and then kind of smush them together. And those 3 pictures that it takes, one is a little too bright, one is a little too dark, and one is properly exposed. And it's going to take all of the highlights from the dark image and all of the shadows from the light image and smush it together on the one that's kind of in the middle. Effectively, what your camera is doing is making sure that it takes those 3 pictures and gets all of the detail that you might want in that. There are other ways to achieve these looks without necessarily just trusting the camera. When you use HDR in a camera, what happens is it blends it together as best it can. It might not be the amount of HDR that you want, or it might be maybe too much. What a lot of people might do is something called bracketing. Bracketing takes those 3, 5, 9 pictures even, and it'll take it from super bright to super dark, and then it doesn't smush them together. You have to go and smush it together in a software. Merge it together in a software. Anyways, bracketing will let you achieve HDR by merging the pictures on your own. HDR is going to be the camera taking the pictures and merging it for you. Now, in what instances do we want to take advantage of HDR? There are some that are like tried and true that I would say absolutely use HDR for this, one of which is like a beach sunset. If you're on the beach and you're taking a picture of a pretty sunset, you normally have all the pretty colors in the sky, but there's not a lot of light going on for the ocean or the beach. And so you could choose either having a pretty sky or having the ocean, but without doing HDR or bracketing, it'll be hard to get both. Another place I see HDR used a lot is in something like real estate photography. Normally, instead of using the HDR mode on your camera, real estate photographers will do bracketing, which is where you take a picture too bright, too dark, right in the middle, and you merge them together after the fact. And that's because if you are taking a picture inside of a house, it's markedly darker inside of a house than it is outside on a bright sunny day. Places where I wouldn't advise trying to use HDR, anything that is going to be moving, you know. What's happening is the camera's taking 3 pictures, and so if something's moving within those pictures, then it's going to look all weird. You don't need HDR to take portraits usually. HDR can actually even hurt you if you're trying to take pictures of like wildlife. Another little tidbit about HDR is that you will usually want to have your camera on a tripod. That way, the 3 pictures that it takes can be lined up perfectly in either Photoshop or in your camera when it's doing it itself. So that kind of sums HDR up. If you have any questions, do reach out to us. We're always here to help, and we hope to see you soon. Happy Tipsy Tuesday.